In a quiet little town surrounded by green hills and winding roads, there lived a barber named Jack. Jack wasn't rich, nor was he famous, but he had something that many people admired: a kind heart and a steady hand. For over 20 years, he had been cutting hair in the same small shop on Maple Street. It wasn't much to look at. Just 4 wooden chairs, an old mirror streaked with age, and a radio that sputtered static between songs. But it was home to countless conversations, laughter, and even tears. Jack's customers weren't just ordinary clients. They were friends who came not only for a trim but also for his calming presence. Whether it was farmers stopping by after a long day in the fields or school teachers seeking advice about their students, everyone felt welcome in Jack's shop. He listened intently as they talked about their joys, their struggles, and sometimes their secrets. Over time, Jack became more than a barber. He was a confidant, a counselor, and a pillar of the community. One crisp autumn morning, the air carried the scent of fallen leaves and sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of Jack's shop. As usual, Jack arrived early, unlocked the door, and turned on the old radio. The sound of crackling voices filled the room as he swept the floor, preparing for another day of work. By mid-morning, the shop was buzzing with activity. Regulars greeted each other warmly, exchanging stories about football games, harvests, and family gatherings. Just as Jack finished giving a buzz cut to Mr. Thompson, the local baker, the bell above the door jingled softly. A man stepped inside, hesitating for a moment before approaching the counter. He looked worn out, his face lined with exhaustion, and his clothes were faded and patched up. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of sadness and determination, that caught Jack's attention immediately. "Can I help you?" Jack asked kindly, setting aside his scissors. I need a haircut," the man replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded and gestured toward one of the empty chairs. "Have a seat. My name's Jack." As the man settled into the chair, Jack draped a cloth around his shoulders and began snipping away at his unkempt hair. At first, the man said nothing, staring blankly at his reflection in the mirror. But as the minutes passed, he began to open up. "I'm a veteran," he said quietly, running a calloused hand over his stubbled chin. "Served overseas for almost 10 years. Came back last spring, but things haven't been easy." Jack paused momentarily, meeting the man's gaze in the mirror. "That must have been tough," he said gently. The veteran sighed deeply. "It is. No one understands what it's like. The nightmares, the guilt, the feeling that you don't belong anymore. Most days I can barely get out of bed." Jack listened without interrupting, letting the man pour out his pain. He had heard similar stories before from other veterans who visited his shop, and he always made sure to give them space to talk. When the haircut was done, Jack removed the cloth and handed the man a small mirror so he could see the result. "What do I owe you?" the veteran asked, reaching for his wallet. Jack shook his head firmly. "Nothing. Consider it my way of saying thank you for your service and for trusting me with your story." The man's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with gratitude. "You don't know how much this means to me," he murmured. "I'll pay you back someday, I promise." "No need," Jack replied with a warm smile. "Just take care of yourself, all right?" The veteran nodded, clutching the strap of his backpack tightly as he stood up. Before leaving, he turned back to Jack and said, "People like you make me believe there's still good in this world." Then he walked out the door, disappearing into the crisp autumn air. Jack watched him go, feeling a sense of satisfaction. Helping others came naturally to him. It was part of who he was. Little did he know, however, that this seemingly ordinary act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. Later that evening, as Jack locked up the shop and headed home, he couldn't shake the image of the veteran's grateful smile from his mind. He wondered where the man was going, whether he had a place to stay, and if anyone else would show him the same compassion. These thoughts lingered as Jack drifted off to sleep, unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but the calmness of the day belied the turmoil that awaited Jack. As he unlocked the shop door and flipped the sign to open, He had no idea that his world was about to be turned upside down, and that the choices he made today would ripple far beyond the walls of his humble barber shop. For now, though, all Jack could do was focus on the task at hand, sweeping the floor, brewing coffee, and waiting for his first customer of the day. After all, life in a small town moved at its own pace, and Jack had learned long ago to take each moment as it came. The morning after Jack's encounter with the veteran started like any other. The sun rose lazily over the hills, casting golden light across the sleepy town. Birds chirped cheerfully outside Jack's barber shop as he unlocked the door and flipped the sign to open. Inside, the familiar scent of shaving cream and polished wood greeted him. He turned on the old radio, which crackled to life with a soft melody, and began his routine, sweeping the floor, arranging the chairs, and making sure everything was ready for the day ahead. By mid-morning, the shop was bustling. Regulars streamed, filling the air with laughter and chatter. Mr. Thompson, the baker, stopped by for his weekly trim, bringing along a box of fresh donuts as usual. Mrs. Carter, the schoolteacher, came in to complain about her rowdy students while Jack carefully styled her hair. For a while it felt like just another ordinary day in the life of a small-town barber. But then, around noon, the bell above the door jingled again. This time, instead of one of his regular customers, a sharply dressed man walked in. It was Mayor Peterson, a tall, imposing figure known throughout the town for his stern demeanor and no-nonsense attitude. Everyone respected him, or at least pretended to, but few actually liked him. His sudden appearance in the barber shop sent a ripple of unease through the room. "Good afternoon, Mayor," Jack greeted politely, though his stomach churned with apprehension. "Jack," the mayor replied curtly, taking a seat in one of the chairs without waiting to be asked. "Give me a quick trim. I've got a meeting later." Jack nodded and grabbed his scissors, trying to ignore the tension that seemed to fill the air. As he worked, the mayor remained silent, his sharp eyes scanning the room as if searching for something or someone to criticize. Finally, when Jack had finished trimming the last strand of hair, the mayor leaned back in the chair and cleared his throat. "I heard about what happened yesterday," he said abruptly, his tone cold and clipped. Jack froze, his hands hovering over the comb. "What do you mean, sir? That veteran you gave a free haircut to?" the mayor continued, narrowing his eyes. "Word travels fast in this town, Jack. People are talking." Jack swallowed hard, unsure where this conversation was headed. "I just thought, well, he needed help, that's all." The mayor sighed heavily, shaking his head as though disappointed. "You're aware that city funds can't support such gestures, aren't you? Acts like these set a dangerous precedent. People might start expecting handouts left and right." Jack frowned, feeling a knot tighten in his chest. "With all due respect, Mayor, it wasn't about setting a precedent. It was about doing the right thing. The man served our country. He deserves a little kindness." The mayor's expression darkened. "Kindness doesn't pay the bills, Jack, and neither does charity. We have rules for a reason. Besides, times are tough. Budget cuts are hitting us hard, and we can't afford to let sentimentality get in the way of progress." Before Jack could respond, the mayor stood up and straightened his suit jacket. "Unfortunately, I'm going to have to shut down your shop effective immediately. It's nothing personal, it's just business." Jack's heart sank as the words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Shut it down? Why? I haven't done anything wrong." The mayor shrugged, his face devoid of emotion. "It's not about what you've done. It's about what you represent. If we allow exceptions, others will demand them too, and frankly, we can't risk that kind of instability right now." Without another word, the mayor strode out of the shop, leaving behind a stunned silence. Jack stared at the empty chair where the mayor had sat, his mind racing. How could this happen? All he'd done was help someone in need. Wasn't that what being part of a community was all about? As the reality of the situation began to sink in, anger bubbled up inside him. Anger at the mayor, at the system, at the unfairness of it all. But beneath the anger was a deep sense of loss. The barbershop wasn't just a place of work. It was his identity, his purpose. Losing it felt like losing a part of himself. Word of the closure spread quickly. By late afternoon, a crowd had gathered outside the shop, murmuring in disbelief. Some were angry, shouting about corruption and injustice. Others were sad, voicing their support for Jack and lamenting the loss of such a beloved institution. Even those who rarely visited the shop showed up, offering words of encouragement or simply standing in solidarity. Mrs. Carter, the schoolteacher, approached Jack as he stood behind the counter, staring blankly at the scissors in his hand. "This is ridiculous," she said firmly. "They can't just take away your livelihood like this. There has to be something we can do." Jack shook, his head feeling defeated. What can we do? The mayor's made up his mind. No one's going to stand up against him, not even the council. "We'll see about that," Mrs. Carter replied, her voice steely with determination. She turned to the crowd and raised her voice. "Listen up, everyone. We're not letting this slide. Jack's been a cornerstone of this town for years, and we're going to fight for him. Starting tomorrow, we're organizing a protest outside City Hall. Bring your families, bring your friends. Let's show the mayor that we won't tolerate this kind of injustice." The crowd erupted into cheers, but Jack felt numb. He appreciated their support, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was futile. The mayor held all the power, and there was no way a bunch of townsfolk could change his mind. That evening, as Jack locked up the shop for what might be the last time, he felt a heavy weight settle over him. The streets were quiet now, the excitement of the day replaced by an eerie stillness. He trudged home slowly, replaying the events of the past 24 hours in his mind. Helping the veteran had seemed like such a simple act, a moment of compassion in an otherwise ordinary day. Yet it had spiraled into something far bigger than he could have imagined. Back at his house, Jack sat alone in the dimly lit living room, staring at the walls covered with photographs of happy customers and proud moments from his career. Each picture told a story, a memory of connection and camaraderie. Now those memories felt like ghosts haunting him, reminders of everything he was about to lose. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, there was a knock at the door. Reluctantly, Jack got up and opened it to find Sarah, the young woman, who ran the local library. She carried a stack of books under one arm and wore a determined look on her face. "Jack," she said firmly, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "I know you're feeling hopeless right now, but you can't give up. Not after everything you've done for this town." She placed the books on the coffee table and gestured for him to sit down. "These are stories of people who faced impossible odds and still managed to turn things around. Read them. Let them remind you that even in the darkest times, there's always hope." Jack glanced at the books, then back at Sarah. Her conviction was contagious, and for the first time since the mayor's visit, he felt a flicker of optimism. Maybe she was right. Maybe giving up wasn't the answer. As Sarah left and the night grew darker, Jack picked up one of the books and began to read. With each page, he found himself drawn into tales of resilience and courage. Slowly, the weight on his shoulders began to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever happened next, Jack knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't go down without a fight. The next morning, the town woke up buzzing with outrage. News of Jack's barbershop closure had spread like wildfire, igniting a mix of anger, disbelief, and determination among the residents. Flyers plastered on every lamppost and bulletin board called for protests outside City Hall. Local businesses showed their support by offering discounts to anyone who brought in receipts from Jack's shop, a gesture that quickly turned into a symbol of defiance against the mayor's decision. Even the local newspaper ran a front-page headline, "When Kindness Becomes a Crime." For Jack, however, the whirlwind of activity felt surreal. He spent most of the day sitting alone in his now empty shop, staring at the scissors and razors he'd used for so many years. What was he supposed to do now? Who was he without his craft? These questions haunted him as he watched the townsfolk march past his window, holding signs that read "Save Jack's Shop" and "Kindness Matters." Despite their efforts, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was all futile. The mayor held all the power and no amount of protesting would change his mind, or so Jack believed. But the people weren't about to give up. By mid-afternoon, The protest outside City Hall had grown into a sea of determined faces. Farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and even teenagers skipped school to join the cause. Mrs. Carter stood on a makeshift platform, her voice ringing out over the crowd. "We're here today because we refuse to let kindness be punished," she shouted, earning cheers and applause. "Jack has been the heart of this town for decades. He's given us more than just haircuts. He's given us friendship, trust, and a sense of belonging. And now, when he needed our support the most, the mayor turned his back on him. But we won't turn our backs on Jack." The crowd erupted again, chanting slogans like "Justice for Jack" and "No to Corruption." Some carried banners featuring photos of Jack cutting hair or posing with satisfied customers. Others shared personal stories of how Jack had made a difference in their lives. One elderly woman spoke tearfully about how Jack had visited her husband during his final days, giving him a dignified haircut despite knowing he wouldn't survive the week. A young boy recounted how Jack had taught him how to tie a tie before his middle school dance. Each story added fuel to the fire, strengthening the resolve of everyone present. Meanwhile, inside City Hall, Mayor Peterson paced nervously in his office. He hadn't expected such a strong backlash. Sure, he'd faced criticism before, but nothing like this. The sheer size of the protest, and the passion behind it, was alarming. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from council members, business owners, and even distant relatives urging him to reconsider. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself, glancing out the window at the throng below. It was just a barber shop. Why are they making such a fuss? His assistant knocked softly before entering the room. "Sir, you should see this," she said, handing him a stack of letters and emails from concerned citizens. "People are threatening to boycott city events if you don't reverse your decision." Mayor Peterson groaned, sinking into his chair. He hadn't anticipated the domino effect his actions would have. Closing Jack's shop wasn't just about punishing an act of generosity. It was meant to send a message about fiscal responsibility and following rules. But somewhere along the way it had become something much bigger, a battle between compassion and bureaucracy. Back at the protest, Sarah, the librarian, addressed the crowd, her voice calm but commanding. "We've shown the mayor that we won't stay silent," she said. "But protests alone won't fix this. We need solutions. Tomorrow we'll gather signatures for a petition demanding Jack's shop be reopened. We'll take it straight to the council meeting next week. Let's show them that kindness isn't a liability, it's an asset." The crowd roared in agreement, and volunteers immediately began circulating sheets for signatures. Others brainstormed ideas for fundraisers to help Jack financially until the issue was resolved. For the first time since the closure, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. As he stood on the sidelines watching the scene unfold, tears welled up in his eyes, not from sadness but from gratitude. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the protesters dispersed, promising to return the next day. Jack locked up his shop once again, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. When he got home, he found several handwritten notes slipped under his door. One read, "Thank you for reminding us what it means to care. We're with you every step of the way." Another simply said, "Don't lose faith, you're not alone." Reading these messages brought warmth to Jack's heart. He realized that while losing his shop had been devastating, it had also revealed something beautiful: the strength and unity of his community. The next morning, Jack joined the growing number of volunteers organizing the petition drive. Tables were set up in the town square where people lined up to sign their names. Children drew pictures of Jack cutting hair, which were taped to the walls of nearby shops. Local musicians performed free concerts to keep spirits high, and food stalls donated meals to feed the volunteers. It was as if the entire town had come alive with a shared mission. By the end of the day, thousands of signatures had been collected. The momentum was undeniable, and word of the movement began spreading beyond the town's borders. Journalists from neighboring cities arrived to cover the story, interviewing Jack and other residents. Social media posts tagged "Where Stand with Jack" went viral, drawing attention from across the country. One evening, as Jack sat at home reviewing the stacks of signed petitions, There was another knock at the door. This time it was Mr. Thompson, the baker, holding a tray of freshly baked goods. "I thought you could use some cheering up," he said with a grin, setting the tray on the table. "And I wanted to tell you something. After hearing about what happened, I talked to my suppliers. They've agreed to donate materials so I can bake bread and cakes for fundraisers. Whatever we raise will go directly to supporting you until this mess is sorted out." Jack was overwhelmed by the gesture. "Mr. Thompson, you didn't have to do that." "Of course I did," the baker interrupted. "You've always been there for us. Now it's our turn to be there for you." As the days passed, similar acts of generosity poured in. The owner of the local hardware store offered to repair Jack's shop for free once it reopened. A group of teenagers organized a charity car wash, donating all proceeds to Jack's cause. Even strangers who had never met Jack sent letters of encouragement and small donations. Despite the mounting pressure, Mayor Peterson remained stubborn. At a press conference, he defended his decision, claiming that reopening Jack's shop would set a dangerous precedent. "We can't run a town based on emotions," he declared. "Rules exist for a reason." But the public wasn't buying it. Protesters gathered outside his house chanting slogans late into the night. Council members openly criticized his handling of the situation, calling for a vote of no confidence. Even national news outlets picked up the story, portraying the mayor as out of touch and heartless. Faced with mounting opposition, the mayor finally agreed to meet with representatives from the town to discuss possible resolutions. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, leaving everyone anxiously awaiting the outcome. For Jack, the whirlwind of events had been both exhausting and exhilarating. He marveled at how a single act of kindness had sparked such a powerful movement. Though the future was still uncertain, one thing was clear: he wasn't fighting alone. His community had rallied around him, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures can ignite the biggest changes. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Jack allowed himself to dream, not just of reopening his shop, but of a world where kindness was celebrated rather than punished. Little did he know, the fight was far from over, and the next chapter of his journey would bring unexpected allies and life-changing revelations. The days leading up to the council meeting were tense but filled with anticipation. The entire town was abuzz, discussing strategies and rehearsing speeches. Flyers continued to multiply, plastered on every available surface. Even the local church held a special prayer service for Jack, asking for strength and justice. It seemed as though everyone had taken ownership of the cause, determined to see it through. Jack, however, found himself caught between hope and anxiety. On one hand, he was deeply moved by the outpouring of support from his community. He'd never imagined that so many people cared about him, or that they would go to such lengths to fight for him. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the fear that their efforts might not be enough. The mayor was a stubborn man, and reversing his decision would require more than just public pressure. One evening, as Jack sat in his living room flipping through the petitions filled with thousands of signatures, there was another knock at the door. By now, visitors had become a regular occurrence, but this time something felt different. When Jack opened the door, he froze in shock. Standing before him was a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a crisp military uniform adorned with medals. His stern yet kind face was instantly recognizable. It was General Harper, a highly respected figure known across the country for his leadership and dedication to veterans' causes. "Mr. Jack," the general greeted warmly, extending his hand. "I'm here because I heard about what happened to you." Jack blinked in confusion, shaking the offered hand. "General Harper? What? How did you hear about me?" The general chuckled softly, stepping inside when Jack gestured for him to enter. "Let's just say your story has traveled farther than you realize. But let me start from the beginning." He took a seat at the kitchen table and Jack followed suit, still struggling to process the situation. "The veteran you helped, the man who came into your shop last week, he's my brother-in-law," the general explained. "When he returned home after visiting you, he couldn't stop talking about the kindness you showed him. He told us everything, how you listened to him, how you refused payment, and how much it meant to him during a difficult time in his life." Jack nodded slowly. remembering the man's grateful smile as he left the shop. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," he said humbly. "Just tried to treat him like anyone else." The general leaned forward, his expression serious. "That's exactly why it matters, Jack. In today's world, acts of genuine compassion are rare. People often turn away from those in need, either out of indifference or fear of consequences. But you didn't hesitate. You saw a fellow human being struggling and chose to help without expecting anything in return. That's remarkable." Jack shifted uncomfortably, unused to receiving such praise. It wasn't about making a statement, it was just the right thing to do. "And that's what makes you extraordinary," the general replied firmly. "You remind us that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. And right now your community needs someone like you more than ever." Jack frowned, unsure where this conversation was heading. "What do you mean?" The general smiled knowingly. "I've been following the news about your shop and the protests. Your story has inspired countless people, not just in this town, but across the nation. People are tired of systems that prioritize rules over humanity. They're looking for examples of what true leadership looks like. And you, Jack, are providing that example." Before Jack could respond, the general reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, social media posts, and letters from individuals who had been touched by Jack's story. Some came from veterans thanking him for reminding them that civilians still cared. Others were from ordinary citizens expressing admiration for his courage and humility. "I want you to speak at an upcoming event honoring veterans," the general continued. "It's being held in the state capitol next month, and it will be attended by politicians, military leaders, and members of the press. Your voice could inspire real change, not just for yourself, but for others facing similar challenges." Jack hesitated, feeling overwhelmed. Public speaking wasn't his forte. He preferred quiet conversations in the comfort of his barber chair. "I don't know if I'm the right person for that," he admitted. "I'm just a barber." "You're more than that," the general countered gently. "You're proof that even small actions can create big waves. Trust me, Jack, your words have power. Let them be heard." After some deliberation, Jack reluctantly agreed. Though nervous, he recognized the opportunity to shine a light on the issues affecting not only him, but also countless others who felt invisible in society. A growing movement in the days that followed. Preparations for the council meeting intensified. Armed with petitions, testimonials, and evidence of widespread support, the townsfolk entered City Hall ready to make their case. Mayor Peterson sat at the head of the table, flanked by council members who looked uneasy under the weight of public scrutiny. Mrs. Carter led the charge, presenting the signed petitions and recounting stories of how Jack had impacted lives. Sarah followed with a passionate speech about the importance of prioritizing humanity over bureaucracy. Other residents spoke up, sharing personal anecdotes and emphasizing the role Jack played in fostering a sense of community. Finally, it was Jack's turn to address the council. Nervously clearing his throat, he stood up and began to speak. "I never expected any of this," he started, his voice trembling slightly. "All I wanted was to help someone who needed it. But somewhere along the way, that simple act turned into something bigger, a reminder that we're stronger together than we are apart. My shop isn't just a place where people get haircuts. It's a place where they feel seen, heard, and valued. If closing it means silencing that connection, then we're losing more than a business. We're losing a piece of who we are as a community." The room fell silent as Jack finished speaking. Even the mayor, who had remained stoic throughout the meeting, appeared visibly affected. A turning point later that evening, the council announced its decision. Jack's shop would reopen immediately, and new policies would be implemented to better support small businesses and veterans. Cheers erupted both inside City Hall and outside, where hundreds of residents had gathered to await the verdict. For Jack, the victory was bittersweet. While relieved to have his livelihood restored, he knew the battle wasn't truly over. There were still systemic issues to address, and the fight for compassion over conformity would continue. As he walked home that night, surrounded by friends and neighbors celebrating their hard-fought win, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that his journey wasn't just about saving a barber shop. It was about proving that kindness could triumph against all odds. Little did he know, the ripple effects of his actions were only beginning to unfold. The reopening of Jack's barbershop was nothing short of a celebration. The entire town came together to mark the occasion, transforming Maple Street into a lively festival. Colorful banners hung from lampposts, and balloons bobbed in the breeze above the crowd. Local musicians played cheerful tunes on guitars and fiddles while tables laden with homemade pies, cakes, and sandwiches lined the sidewalks. It wasn't just a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It was a declaration that kindness had won. Jack stood outside his shop, overwhelmed by the turnout. He hadn't expected this kind of response. Men, women, and children filled the street, many holding signs that read, "Welcome back, Jack," and "Where kindness always wins." Even strangers from neighboring towns showed up, eager to meet the man whose story had inspired them. As the mayor approached the podium to deliver a brief apology, the crowd grew silent. Though reluctant, he acknowledged his mistake and praised the community for standing united. "Sometimes," he admitted, "we forget that rules are meant to serve people, not the other way around. Today, I'm proud to say that we've learned an important lesson about compassion and resilience." When it was Jack's turn to speak, he stepped forward hesitantly, clutching a pair of scissors as if they were talismans. His voice trembled at first, but as he looked out at the sea of familiar faces, warmth flooded through him. "I never imagined my little shop could mean so much to so many people," he began. "But what I've realized is that it's not really about the shop. It's about connection. About being there for each other when times get tough. This isn't just my victory, it's ours. Together, we proved that even in a world full of challenges, kindness can make a difference." The applause that followed was thunderous. People cheered, whistled, and clapped until their hands hurt. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. A new beginning. With the shop reopened, life slowly returned to us, normal. Or rather, a new version of normal. Customers streamed in daily, eager to sit in Jack's chair again. But something had changed. Conversations weren't limited to weather updates or sports scores anymore. People talked openly about struggles, fears, and dreams. Jack's shop became more than ever a sanctuary, a place where everyone felt safe to share their stories. One day, a young man named Alex walked in. He was quiet, almost shy, and sat nervously in the chair. As Jack began cutting his hair, Alex opened up about how the recent events had inspired him. "I saw your story online," Alex said softly. "It made me realize I want to help people too. That's why I've decided to join the Peace Corps after college. I want to make a difference like you did." Jack paused, touched by the sincerity in Alex's voice. "You don't have to do big things to make a difference," he replied gently. "Small acts matter just as much. Sometimes all it takes is listening or lending a hand." Alex nodded thoughtfully, leaving the shop with renewed determination. Over the weeks, similar conversations unfolded. Parents brought their kids to teach them the value of empathy. Strangers stopped by simply to thank Jack for reminding them of humanity's goodness. The ripple effect. Meanwhile, Jack's upcoming speech at the state capitol loomed closer. Nervous but determined, he practiced tirelessly, rehearsing, his words late into the night. On the day of the event, Sarah accompanied him, offering encouragement along the way. When Jack finally took the stage, dressed in his best suit, the audience fell silent. Politicians, veterans, journalists, and ordinary citizens watched intently as he recounted his journey, from helping a struggling veteran to losing his shop, and ultimately, to inspiring a movement. "My story isn't unique," he concluded. "It's proof that every act of kindness has the power to create change. Whether it's giving someone a haircut, offering a listening ear, or simply smiling at a stranger, these moments matter. They remind us that we're all connected, that our actions shape the world around us, Let's choose compassion over indifference, unity over division. Because when we do, miracles happen. The room erupted in applause, and tears glistened in many eyes. Journalists rushed to interview him afterward, while attendees lined up to shake his hand. Social media exploded with hashtags like Choose Kindness and Inspired by Jack. Back home, the town celebrated once again. Flyers were printed declaring, "Our barber changed the world," and businesses offered discounts in honor of Jack's achievement. For the first time, Jack allowed himself to fully embrace the impact he'd made. Finding purpose. In the months that followed, Jack continued to run his shop, welcoming customers old and new. But he also embraced a broader role in the community. Schools invited him to speak to students about the importance of kindness. Nonprofits sought his advice on supporting veterans and small businesses. Even national organizations reached out, asking him to participate in campaigns promoting empathy and inclusion. Though the attention was flattering, Jack remained humble. "I'm still just a barber," he often joked. "Haircuts are my specialty, not speeches." Yet deep down, he knew he'd found a new purpose. Helping others wasn't just part of his job, it was his calling. One evening, as Jack locked up the shop and turned off the lights, he paused to look out the window. The street was quiet now, lit only by the soft glow of lampposts. Memories of the past few months flashed through his mind. The protests, the petitions, the speeches, the smiles of gratitude. He thought about the veteran who had sparked it all, wondering how he was doing. Had his life improved? Did he feel less invisible? Jack hoped so. After all, that single act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, touching countless lives, including his own. As he walked home under the starlit sky, Jack felt content. Life had thrown him unexpected challenges, but it had also given him gifts beyond measure: friendship, purpose, and hope. For Jack, the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. And he was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could change the world.